Welcome to The Big Break Show, a podcast where we discuss short-term rentals, entrepreneurship, life, mindset, and everything in between. Here are your hosts, Rob Pelosa and Jesse Vasquez.
Hey, family, what's up? Welcome to The Big Break Show, episode number 12. Man, it's been crazy, number 12 already. Hi, Jesse. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
1, 2. Yeah, 12, man. What's going on?
A lot of episodes, man. I know. Here on my studio, hanging out with you.
In the studio. Doesn't it sound, you sound like super cool and you're like, yeah, I'm in the studio.
They sound important. I'm like, I'm out here in the studio recording, making music, recording podcasts, YouTube videos, the works.
Speaking of cool, we have a dude whose name is Noble Crawford, who is, you guys are going to hear him. And we actually met Noble on Clubhouse back in last year, right around this exact same time during COVID when nobody was really leaving their houses. And this guy is a 7-year business owner, a principal partner in short-term rental industry. He's got a super diverse background that spans with, I don't even know how many years, man, back to like 94, that goes back to hospitality, technology, sales. He's worked with brands Marriott, Hilton, IHG. He actually has a course too, that he collaborates with the students. They connect with multifamily owners, property management agencies, to basically create and cultivate win-win partnerships, which is obviously what you want to do. So I'm super pumped for you guys to listen to what he does, how he's been able to grow in the corporate sector. And we deep dive into a lot of stuff short-term rental related. So yeah, enjoy.
Yeah, dude. Listen, guys, for all of you listening and watching, I've known Noble for a long time, and I actually connected with him in the past year, and like we've became pretty cool. Like we talk quite often, and this guy's got a lot of great stuff. And I wish this is a little bit longer. I wish we could have probably recorded like a 3-hour episode, Jesse.
Probably.
We were talking like crazy, going into some good details about everything, the contracts he does. He focuses on government contracting. I mean, he's awesome. I really hope you guys enjoy this show and reach out to him because he's taught a lot of people how to start short-term rentals. A lot of people are always asking me if I teach and stuff like that. And he does this, right? And like a lot of you guys who are like, hey, I want to start Airbnb. Well, you don't need to start Airbnb if you follow what this guy tells you today, because he teaches you how to find your guests before you even get the property, which is awesome. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. Without further ado, here's Mr. Noble Crawford. Noble, dude, thanks for being here today, man. I appreciate it. I'm excited to have you today because you're a fellow short-term rental investor, operator. And yeah, we want to have a good conversation around short-term rentals. We haven't had one on the podcast for about, 4 or 5 episodes or something like that. So today we get to talk about strictly short-term rentals, which is what I love, which is what you do, which is what Jesse does, right? So we're all investors in the short-term rental game, man. So before we get started and started having this conversation, we do want you to introduce yourself, give the viewers and listeners a little bit of info, your backstory, like where you came from, where you started, how you got into all this, even before short-term rentals, what were you doing and all of that?
Got it, man. Well, first of all, guys, hey, I appreciate you having me. Super excited to be on the podcast. So for those who don't know, yes, my name is Noble. So I actually started in hospitality, right? Some years ago. I'm gonna date myself a little bit, but this is back in '95, right? I got my first job in a hotel. And so I worked in the hotel space for probably over 15 years, right? And primarily I was involved from the convention side and conferences and events and things like that from the live event space. But I got to work for all the major brands, the Marriotts, the IHG properties, Hiltons, all of those, right? So good stuff. So I got out of that. I stayed on the technology side, right? Because I was involved in technology on the live event side. I got out of that and I did a little stint in home theater, right? I got to work with some Dallas Cowboy players and some CEOs, companies building out these cool home theaters and whatnot. And then after I did that for a little bit of time, I got into the commercial side, right? So then I was responsible for bigger projects and designing and selling into big projects like stadiums and corporate, everything from corporate boardrooms up to, big full-blown, stadium type level events and things like that. And so I had a couple different verticals that I worked in on that commercial side. And so I worked in corporate, I worked in higher education, I worked in healthcare, I worked in federal and military. So those are my primary verticals. And so I ended up being a commission salesperson in that space. And then in 2017, I think it was, I ended up cashing out. I can tell you that story, and started a marketing agency in that same space. Actually, 2014. cashed out, started a market agency in that same space. And then in 2017, I was introduced to this business. And like they say, the rest is history. And just kind of took off from there, me and my wife.
And by this business, you mean short-term rentals, correct?
Exactly. Yes, sir.
So tell me, what's been the difference between like when you started short-term rentals and before? Like, has it been like a major difference in your life? Is it like just a different business that you started? Like, how's it been?
So that's a good question. So I kind of cut my teeth on the entrepreneurial space really with the agency, right? Once I left my last W-2. And so that was a really good business in terms of, me getting acclimated to being an entrepreneur, understanding the, monthly recurring revenue stream model, which I was really excited about. Once that revenue starts coming in and you get a number of clients paying monthly, it's just like residual, right? But the reality is, man, I had never worked harder in my life, right? So I went from already grinding, working 60, 65 hours a week in my commission sales job to then I'm working like what felt like 80, 90 plus hours a week as an entrepreneur, right? And then because I was in marketing, I had a bunch of different clients. So I had a bunch of different bosses, right? Essentially, right? So I'm like, man, the money's good. But I was like, this is like killing me time-wise, right? And so the big difference from jumping to short-term rentals, once I got up to speed on it, I was able to reduce the amount of time that I'm working in the business on a weekly basis. And you guys know this. And so that was the big game changer for me, right there. It's just being able to take my time back, still be an entrepreneur, still be engaged in an industry that I absolutely love, and still be able to make money.
That's awesome, dude. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, one of the things that I love about this is because even for me, right, to the amount of properties I have now, I'm still working probably like 3 hours a week now. And it's mainly just kind of directing like systems and processes towards the VAs, or sometimes just keeping up on my calendar or checking the pricing strategy. What about you when you do your work in your short-term rentals now? Because I know you have systems and processes around everything as well. What is it that you specifically focus on your business now? Because you're not working in the business anymore. You're not working on the business, right? You're directing and stuff like that, I'm assuming. What are the actual details or things that you're currently actually working on?
Yeah, great question, man. So I would say at this point, I'm even further removed from the business than that. And so I'll give you an example. So early on, we really got a grasp on like what it takes to make this thing, operate, and the tempo and the precision that it takes to keep this business kind of working in an automated fashion. We knew that so there's three things that we talk about: the team, we talk about the systems, and the processes. Like those are the three core things, as you guys know, right? So that team is critical, right? And having those people in place to basically duplicate your efforts, right? And so we found out early on, hey, we needed to hire people and train them to replace ourselves essentially in this business. And so one of the key hires that we made, and we at one time pre-pandemic, we had a number of these positions, but in the business, a lot of people call them runners. We call them community managers, right? So our community managers, we trained to basically do just about everything that we could do in the business, with the exception of the financials, right? And so, our community managers, they do a number of things. They handle ordering for us, right? They handle overseeing the linen services. They handle quality control checks on the cleaners. They'll handle like guest lockouts, right? And things like that. Just any numerous number of things, right? The community managers handle those. And that has removed a significant amount of weight off me. So now I'm focused on, more so just the sales aspect, and really engaging with, existing kind of contracts and clients that we have. And so it's a game changer when you have the right people in place that can, help propel your business forward.
So I got a question regarding that then. Now I'm curious about it because I have a runner, right? And they deal with all of my on the ground stuff. My VAs deal with all my off the ground stuff, all the virtual stuff, all the computer stuff, all of that stuff. If you don't mind me asking, how does that structure look with those community managers that you have in terms of like, do you hire them or are they still 1099, or like, do you have them on a set structure? Like, how does that look?
Great question. So yes, they are 1099s. And we've used college students. So we've used like college graduate level students. That's primarily what we've utilized. And I've also had a relative that did it for a time for us also. And so essentially what we've done is we've taken our community managers and we've trained them to train the housekeeper, the cleaners. Okay. And so so my wife kind of handles the operational side of things. But what she's done is she's trained the community managers to not only train the cleaners on how to clean, but to hire the cleaners as well. Right. So they, from top down, they know this business like the back of their hand. And so each of them are responsible for a specific market. So I'm here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, right? And so it's a big market here. So there's two here. Then we also have Waco and Lubbock. And so those community managers will be responsible for training the housekeepers, doing the quality control checks on the housekeepers. And here's the key: we pay them based out of revenue from our listing. So here's what that looks like, right? Because it sounds like, man, these people are doing a lot. It could get expensive. Well, we pay them a percent. So, inside of your OTAs, inside of like your Airbnbs, where you have that management or administrative fee that you can add, that's how we pay them. So we put a percentage in there and they get that. So it's a pass-through cost to the guest, a pass-through expense. That's how we pay our community managers. So they're trained from the top down to handle all that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. That's actually awesome. I never would have even considered doing that pass-through expense for them. So, I mean, they're kind of invested, right? Because the better you do, the more money you make, the more money they make.
Yep. And it trickles down to the cleaners because the better job they do, and they're getting quality control check, random spot checks. So community manager may come in the middle of a cleaning to see how they're doing stuff, may come in on the back end, may come in on the front end if they're dropping off any type of product or anything, and making sure that they don't know when that person is going to drop in on them on any given day. So it keeps the consistency at a high level as well. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
So in terms of that percent, I'm super curious about this now. So that percentage pay that you do, dude, Noble, this is awesome. I'm always looking at ways to do my business, right? Because I pay per job that they do, right? Which is, it's simple. Hey, this person needs this, go out, I pay them for that job. It's usually $25 depending on the job where it goes. But we have the exact same thing in place. My girl, she's in charge of all my cleaners. She trains all my cleaners. She's in charge of quality assurance. She's in charge of checking the units. Everything that trickles down from the top of training down to the cleaners, to the same thing you do. But I pay her for every specific job. She's even in charge of my storage organization and my ordering, right? She goes out to Costco and buys whenever things are ready, all of that stuff. But I never considered doing that administrative fee payout thing. And again, this might be a little too personal for the podcast, but if you're paying a percentage of the revenue that's coming in, like, doesn't that get super expensive at the end of the year? Like, let's say you do, I don't know, 7 figures or something. Like, how does that work? Is it constant work that they're doing based on that? There's no off limits? Like, hey, if it's 2 a.m., you got to go out and deal with this because you're getting paid? Like, how does that structure look?
Yeah, so exactly. So they are getting paid a percentage for every unit that they're over in their area, right? And so it's based on their region that they're over. And yes, they are required to take care of, a 2 a.m. type issue, whether it's a noise issue, whether they have to go, meet a security type person at the property, or whether they have to actually go out and talk to someone who's locked themselves out for any number of reasons, right? But we're also compensating them in a way that makes them want to stay on board with us, right? So we're paying them well. We're getting them indoctrinated into this business, right? Who's a good example? Sean Rakitic, okay? His number 2 person is the female. Her name's Haley. So our Haleys basically is what we're training. Now she's a rock star because she can basically run his business for him, and that's kind of where we've developed our people to operate in that capacity. Does that make sense? Yeah,
I know her too. She is awesome. I've had conversations with her, so okay, that does make sense. Cool, man, that's awesome. I'm gonna look into that to see how I can do it because this year I'm actually I'm actually going to do it. I was going to train kind of like a COO. They were going to take over my job. I was going to be 100% hands off. They were going to do literally everything I do. I was going to be 100% hands off. I was going to pay them a salary, but they were going to be full time. Like, it doesn't matter what, if it's a 2 a.m. call, you got to go do it. But they were going to be in charge of also like my community managers, right? If something happened, you have to put them in charge. But if I can put one person to do all of it, then I save myself on the back end on my side, and then I save on the front end with the actual community, like my runner payouts every time they go and do a job. So that's interesting. I'm gonna look at that. I appreciate you sharing that, man. So let me ask you another question. I know currently, I mean, can we talk about how many units you have going on? Like, as long as you're completely hands-on, do these people also, do they go out and acquire properties as well, or is that still your job? Like, did you train them to go out and talk to landlords? Because I know we're both in the arbitrage game, right? And are you purchasing as well now? Last time we talked, I think you were.
Yeah, so we do have a couple of duplexes in our portfolio. So we're at 38 right now.
Awesome, man!
We have
wow,
a couple,
congrats,
yeah,
that's cool.
we have a couple of duplexes as part of that 38. And so we don't, those are the community managers are not involved in any capacity in terms of the sales or marketing or anything like that, or going out and getting properties. However, not currently, but probably up until like middle of the pandemic, I did have a business development guy that I trained that was going out, and I trained him to go out and have conversations on our behalf, right? And I would basically commission him on everything he was able to close. And that's what helped us grow through the pandemic. You know, we were going out, as you know, the current state of things during the pandemic, when these properties were, you know, losing people left and right, or, you know, or the rent moratorium was an issue. We were able to go out and actually grow and pick up properties. So having a business development person trained to have those conversations on our behalf was really beneficial. So yeah, that's how we did it.
I got a question. So Noble, how are you going about finding the right people? Because, you know, even being in my business, we're all in the same business. You know, I've been through VAs, I don't even know how many times, and it's hard to find the right VA. But when you start dealing with people that are local on the ground, because I have a person that was a cleaner, you know, we promoted her up into, you know, she's kind of like my assistant now. And then I have another VA on the back end. How do you find people that are going to be vested in the business the same as you? Because at the end of the day, you know, I've worked for companies before where the owners expect the people that work for them to care about the business the way that they do as an owner. And the reality is that nobody's ever going to give a crap the way you do as an owner. So how do you find, or what skills are you? Oh yeah, it's 100% facts. And when you try to have that expectation on somebody, you're like, that expectation is just going to bring you, you know, heartache eventually over time. You can't look at an employee that way. And I learned that a long time ago. And I've watched other, you know, managers do that same thing where it's just doesn't create a good culture. So how do you find a Haley in your environment? What are some of the characteristics you're looking for?
Man, I love this question. So a couple of things. I do not like the hiring process. I do not like vetting people. That's not the best use of my time, nor do I like it, right? So I knew kind of early on, after having gone through the number of cleaners early in the business that I did, and the frustration level that I have, right, with that whole process, I was like, man, I've got to get this off my plate. It is not for me. So one of the first VAs that I picked up was a recruiter. That's her background. For 12, 15 years, that was her background. At multiple different sizes of companies. And she's been an absolute rock star in helping me go out and find the rock stars, right? And so that's been instrumental, extremely effective for us. And what we do is we give her the criteria. We had to train her too on this business model, because she was not familiar with the short-term rental space, and kind of train her on what we're looking for and the type of individuals we're looking for. But once she got a grasp of that and she understood a little bit of the inner workings of the business, she was able to take what she does best, which is the best use of her time, right? Which is going out and recruiting and finding rock stars, and do that for us. And so that was impactful. And then once we found people that actually were great fits and like were in the right position, then we would take care of them. We would pay them higher than normal, than the market average. We would treat them more like family. We would bonus them and incentivize them. And then we would turn around and ask them for their referrals of people like themselves, right? And then in certain opportunities, there's ways for them to move up. So we had one of our senior cleaners that we promoted up to a community manager, because she was just crushing it for us, right? And she was just spot on. And so now that we trained her, and now she knows how to go out and identify other cleaners and then train them. And so, but you hit on a key thing when you said culture, right? Because that's something that's hard to instill in 1099 type people who are not necessarily getting health coverage, right? Who may be part-time, things like that. And so that's really the challenge that we're currently working through right now, is really just instilling that culture amongst everyone in our team, and trying to get them to buy in at a higher level. Because as you pointed out, the owners of the company, they're going to care the most about this bad boy, right? More so than anyone else. And so that's a moving target that we're trying to still dial in. That's a bit of a process, but that's what's helped us so far, is having that recruiter person.
Yeah. I know that this business is heavily weighed on people that are working out of the country. I like to bring business and employ people that are here right now, that I can help significantly impact their lives and actually see it. People in other countries, you can't. And I like that you, Noble, did the same thing. I did the same thing. I had a cleaner that was she was just on it. She was doing what she needed to do. She went extra. She would go out and take care of stuff without even telling me doing it, going out and doing it. And Mel, if you're listening right now, kudos to you. I appreciate you so much. You have these people that can bring your business, they can, catapult your business up. And if you see them, that's where the culture comes from. Like, that's how you start building that culture in your company. And I look at my company, I want to be, I want to grow, I want to be bigger, but you got to start with like the grassroots, the people that are on the ground, the people that you're interacting with daily, who your cleaners are, that entire thing. Like, you have to start there. And I think that a lot of times, with VAs and all that stuff, it's done differently. It's not really, it becomes impersonal. And I feel that that's how culture is built, is on personal relationships, whether you're a manager or boss or whatever or whatnot. I mean, that's just how it starts. And as a company grows, other people want to come work for your company based off the culture that's already there. So, I mean, I think I applaud you on that, because I don't really hear a lot of, people that hire staff or like assistants and things that are local. It's all done overseas, which again, it's cheaper, right? It's cheaper at the end of the day, but you think about the quality of work. Is it equal or better? Yeah. I mean, it could be equal or better, but it's also building a brand that's in your company, that's a culture that creates, opportunities for other people, whether they're looking for it or not.
Yep. Agree 100%. And don't get me wrong. I mean, we've had our share of, international VAs and things like that. And they worked great for us. We started kind of trimming the fat as we were coming into COVID, as it was starting to kind of climax. We were looking for ways, or we were going to, cut expenses. And we had like 6 VAs at one point. Right. And so we gutted that. And we started being really intentional about, having fewer people doing more work and providing them more opportunity, right, across the spectrum, as opposed to having a greater number of people. So at that point, we started cutting a number of our international VAs. But yeah, I agree 100% what you're saying.
I don't know. I'm in between both of you guys, because my VA is international and she's absolutely awesome. She's a rock star, dude. She trains other VAs for me. She's in charge of everything for me, right? Like, the only thing now that she's probably not in charge of is still, I think, my pricing. And I'm slowly training her to get into it. But I mean, she does literally everything. Like, she's more of my personal assistant sometimes as well. I'm like, hey, I need something from Amazon. Can you find it? She'll go out and find it. Like, we've trained other VAs for other operators out from the Philippines as well. She found me a great editor for the podcast and my videos as well. He's with us now and he's doing awesome. He just started and he's done the last 2 and they've came out great. She found me a social media person. I mean, she listens to this sometimes and she knows I love her. And I told her, but you know what though? I do take care of her, right? Because I give her the opportunity to, number 1, make mistakes. I give her the opportunity, number 2, to figure things out on her own. I give her the opportunity to make more money. If she came with me to the idea of, hey, let's train other VAs for other people. I said, for sure. If it works out, why not? Right? If you can make more money, I can make more money. The business makes more money and we grow. Absolutely. And she's been absolutely amazing, man. So I'm in between. I do need somebody here, of course, because as I grow, and we're significantly growing right now, right? Like, we're going to double our portfolio literally by the end of this month. And I now need somebody here to get stuff off my plate, because I don't want to be like, I don't need another job now, right? Like, I don't want to be managing now another person to be managing. I want somebody to come in, do what I do, take over and be able to do that. And so I require somebody here now because someone somewhere else just can't do it. They need to be hands-on. They need to be able to check places, go out and talk to people and do specific things. So I see both points here. And I like both, right? But to me, I think it goes down to what works best for the way you're trying to run your business, I think, right? So anyway, let's transition a little bit into, because we're I mean, this is going great, but I'm curious as to about because I've asked you before about like the whole way of you acquire. I'm always trying to figure out as you grow and by the way you acquire customers, right? And you know where I'm going with this, the government contracts, and Jesse does the nursing contracts. I do a lot of like contracted contracts and insurance companies, but I don't go out and do like actual contracts like this. I want to say 80% comes from Airbnb and VRBO, right, of my bookings. And that just because I happen to be in Orange County next to Disneyland. So, right, it's not like it does the work for me. But when the pandemic hit, I had to actually get creative. Luckily, we got through it and I learned a lot, right? But as I grow, I don't want to rely specifically on Airbnb, VRBO, and these small contracts because 20% only I'm going to be at what, like 48 properties or something like that soon. And nice. So, yeah, thanks, man. And so it's like, I need to be able to find another way to acquire customers outside of these OTAs, right? And so let's talk about that a little bit. I know because I know you do the military contracts. Like, can we talk about how that works for you? How you got started in it? How you acquire them? Or like what's because I've heard you speak on stage, man, and like it still blew me away. I still think about that, right? And you talked about it so good in such good detail. Do you mind speaking about that here?
Yeah, no doubt. So going back to a little bit of my story, right? So if you remember, when I was working in sales, selling commercial, technology, commercial audiovisual and stuff, the verticals that I worked in, again, corporate, higher education, healthcare, federal government, military, right? And so ironically enough, now that I'm in the short-term rental space, what have I kind of started to niche out in? Those same verticals, okay? And so what I'm doing now in this space, it really is based on my experience and what I was doing previously, just selling a different product and service, right? And so at some point in this business, a few years back, I had a light bulb moment go off, and I was like, okay, why am I not, leveraging what I used to do in the past for the short-term rental business? It's the same process. It's just a different product or service that you're selling, right? And so real quick, for a little context, one of the things I had to do, I was with a company at one point that was, a fairly new kind of startup type operation, and because we were, we had to actually, and I was assigned to work across these different verticals as an account manager, but I had to actually go into these different, companies and these different government organizations and stuff like that. And I had to get our company, our new kind of startup technology company in the door to be on their vendor list. To just transact business with them, because they would put out what are called RFPs, requests for proposals, right, for different products and services that we just happen to sell. And so I would have to go in and get us all the paperwork, go through all the red tape, all of that stuff to get us put on the list so we can transact business across these verticals, right? So there is a specific process to do that, right? And there's a way that you have to navigate that to get around the gatekeeper. And Jesse knows what I'm talking about, right? You can't just pick up the phone. You can't just walk in the front door and say, hey, I want to add my company and I want to sell you this or that, right? There's a certain process you have to go through. And so once the light bulb moment happened, I was like, I could just do the same thing with short-term rentals, right? And so at that point, once I thought about that, then the challenge was, well, who really needs furnished accommodations? Right? Like who are these types of places? So then I had to kind of think through, what types of, across these verticals, what types of individuals would be traveling or would need accommodations for any length of time. Right. And so once I was able to identify that, I just used the same process to get past the gatekeeper to the decision maker to put us in a position to either be added to their vendor list, so going through purchasing or the procurement department, right? Or B, to be able to be on a list of accommodations providers alongside the Marriotts, the Hiltons, the Holiday Inns, all of those folks, right? Now, mind you, if we go back to 95, I worked in hospitality, right? So I know what the process is like, and even back in that time, there was times really, because I was young, I was in my 20s. There was times where I was working 2 jobs. So I was doing my day job, and then I was doing like night audit, like at the front desk overnight, right? And so I learned, I amassed a lot of information about this business. So one of the things I know is that with some of these limited state properties, they actually have contracts with the same types of companies and organizations that I go after now, right? And so what they do is they'll have special rates that they offer, and they'll have, they may throw in some additional things like that, but it's very similar. And so once I determine, hey, this is the type of vertical that's going to need my services, in the short-term rental space, and this is the type of person I need to speak to, then it's just a matter of executing after that, right? We can walk through that if you want, but that's kind of the short of it, and of how I came into doing exactly what I do now and getting into this direct kind of booking space.
I got a question, man, because sales guys get along really well, Noble, because I know exactly what you're talking about on that end. So I've mentioned this before. Sales is one of those things that if you can just get good at it or learn it, it'll go into any business. Like if you have sales, you have marketing, and you have drive, there's no way that your business is going to fail. Like those 3 things alone will create a funnel for your business for sustainability over time. And I've watched that happen throughout, I just like you was like training people and getting them good at sales. And, a lot of it's just problem solving. It all goes back to problem solving issues that there's not enough need for, the military. There's not enough people to actually come in for whatever it is that you need. So were you hitting the ground, knocking on doors face to face, or are you doing all these calls virtually?
Yeah. So starting off, I was old school, right? Which a lot of people they don't understand like what goes into that prospecting piece, right? And so I was the boots on the ground. I was the one going to these places because that's what I was used to doing, right? Until I learned to put the system in place, right? And so yes, I was going, and so here's what I did. Here's how I kind of started. So I knew from when I was selling, and I'll just pick a vertical, for example. So healthcare, for example. So unlike you, where you're dealing more with the nurses and the things like that, I had one of my clients, one of my customers, when I was selling in the technology space, they had graduate level doctoral students, right? That were coming there. And in addition to that center where that training element was in, they actually had like a clinical services they would provide to the public. Okay. And so these doctoral graduates that were coming there, they still needed accommodations, right? Because they were past the traditional, get their bachelor's and everything. And they were going through the process of, becoming full-on doctors and stuff. And so, but while they were there, they still needed those accommodations while they were attending training, right? For, a year, 2 years, whatever the case was. And so, so one of the first people that I reached out to was them. And I said, look, I know, because I was selling into that account. I was just selling different stuff. So I said, I know that you guys have students that are staying off campus, right? Because they're not staying in traditional housing. And I wanted to know, who can I talk to that could get me plugged in? I'm doing this new business now, and find out how I can provide services for them, right? And so once I got that, and I kind of have an inside angle, but once I got the name right in the department that I needed to go to, I was beeline right across campus to talk to that person, right? Now, here's the thing. I was ready to go to have that conversation. So everything was in place in terms of my entity. I had physical marketing material with me, right? So it wasn't just to go look at my website. I actually have full-on brochure, color, inserts, the whole 9 yards, very professional with the cards, the whole 9 yards, right? So when I'm walking in, just like I did when I was working with the technology company and I had those resources available to me, I'm walking in with the same type of professional resources, right? And I'm leveraging those along, with the way I'm communicating my USP, my unique selling proposition, and we were able to get that. That was our foot in the door for the healthcare space. And then it was on the heels of that we found out that nurses traveling to the medical district, the big hospitals in town, was a legit thing, right? This is before like traveling nurses really took off. And so what did I do? I went to the medical district, right? I went to Harris Healthcare, right? I went to Methodist. I went to those hospitals. I went to HR, just some of the things like we talked about. And I had a conversation and I had my marketing materials with me. And I said, this is the product and service we provide. I want to know how we can, get our name on any sort of list and things like that. And so I was put in contact with another, I don't know what her position was, but another lady at the hospital who was working with some of the nurses that had been traveling in and out. And she said, we have some people coming in and let me get you plugged in with them. Now, before Jesse, you jumped on the scene with the agency thing, I didn't know that was a thing, right? But as it turns out, those nurses were working with an agency. I just didn't know how to navigate blowing that up into something bigger. But I did get my little one-offs, from the hospital and referrals and things like that. So that's where it started. And then I took that and I said, okay, I know these other verticals. Let me go in these other verticals. And when I hit that, what I consider the small government vertical, boom, up and to the right, it just took off.
Okay, so when you say government vertical, okay, I want to focus. What do you mean by that? Like, are you when you get these government contracts and stuff like that, aside from the medical stuff and things like that? Because I do want you to touch on that a little bit. What do you mean by that? Like, are you focusing after specific, like people who are here, like at a base, like at a military base, or is it just like any type of federal government contract, like a company that signed a contract with the government or something like that?
Good question. So when you're dealing with the actual military, that's a little bit different than dealing with a third-party company that has a contract with the government, okay? So that's two separate things. So let me touch on both real quick. So on the military side, there's what's called a BAH, a basic allowance for housing, okay? Now, with active duty military personnel, they have the option of staying on base or staying at off-base housing, right? And I'm a veteran myself too, so I had some working knowledge at least of how this kind of works, okay? And so there's a basic allowance for housing, a BAH, right? But in order to make that work, I knew that the money resides with the officer level type of military personnel because they get the highest amount of money towards housing, right? And then if they have a family, that notches up even more, right? And so, there's a base out here, Naval Air Station, Joint Reserve Base. Okay, so there is and I don't remember the exact terminology right off the top of my head, but there is basically an off-base housing office that exists at most military bases, most military installations, right? And so what you want to do is you want to go to the off-base housing office and you want to engage with them because those are the ones who are going to get you set up to where you can provide housing specifically for active duty military personnel who are looking to stay off base. Okay. So that's one whole kind of subset of the federal government. Now, the other side of it is companies that have contracts with the federal government. So defense contractors is a big one, right? So something like a Raytheon, or something like a McKesson or something like that, right? So some of these companies have big defense contracts, right? And so one of the things we did there, because defense contractors could be a mix of federal employees, it could even be civilian contractors, right? But when they're traveling on government business, then they get access to, what I've explained before, which is the GS, right? The Government Services Administration rate, right? And so the GSA rate is basically their per night rate that they can pay or that they can get housing for, essentially, right? And so anyone who's traveling as a federal contractor or a federal employee has access to that rate. Okay, so let me give you an example. So here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Raytheon is here, right? They have a big facility out in far north Dallas, okay? And so one of the things that we did was we went, so again, get back to what Jesse was talking about, because there's a little sales involved here, but we had to find out who at that facility was the decision maker in determining their housing options for those folks traveling to come to town to do their training, okay? So we had to navigate that piece, okay? So where we started with LinkedIn, okay? So we had to identify first by doing the company search, then looking at two departments, okay? So like Jesse talked about, we look at HR, but then we also look at the purchasing or the procurement department. They can be named either way, right? But it's typically going to be purchasing or procurement, right? because there's two angles that we'll take to try to get to the decision maker. Okay. So, and also HR sometimes. Okay. And so, so once we've identified, hey, this company has a government contract, right? And this is public information. You can Google it. This company has a government contract. We need to get the decision maker. We go to LinkedIn. We find out who in that city for that company is working in these departments. And then we'll make a list of like 3 to 5 people, right? Because those are the 3 to 5 people that we're going to try to get to find out if they're a decision maker or if they can point us to the decision maker. Okay. And so once we've identified them, then we'll reach out to HR typically first, and we'll say, okay, XYZ, I'm calling on behalf of XYZ is my product or service, and I'm trying to get in contact with the person, or actually what we'll say is we're trying to get in contact with such and such or such and such, because we've already identified them on LinkedIn, so we want to name drop, okay? And when we name drop, because LinkedIn is a little hit or miss sometimes because you don't know if the person's still there, their profile's updated, this and that. So we'll drop a couple of names just in case somebody has left or is not in that department any longer. Well, so we're trying to get in touch with so-and-so or so-and-so, and typically when we do that and we're going through HR instead of the receptionist, they'll say, okay, well, you need to, I can transfer you, right? Which will put us in the voicemail sometimes, or you'll need, we can't give out their information. That's one sometimes that we get. There's a workaround for that. And then sometimes, you'll need to, to email them if you're trying to get in contact with them, right? And so it really kind of depends. Okay, so that's one angle that we go through. The other angle that we go through is through the purchasing or procurement department, okay? And so we'll call in and we'll say, there's a product or service that we have. We want to know how we can get our company or our entity listed as a vendor to do business with your company. Now, mind you, for the Raytheon example, Raytheon was working with a third party company that was providing their travel for these contractors and federal employees coming in, right? So the person wasn't internal. There was an internal liaison, but the company that manages that was a third party, okay? So this requires some homework, right? And the ability to navigate this. And so once we were able to find, so we contacted purchasing. I said, we want to get on the list of vendors for this specific service. And that's when we find out, well, we don't take on vendors for that. That's outsourced. Okay. And then we said, okay, well, great. So who will we need to contact? You need to contact XYZ Travel, right? And so then we've got a contact company and many times a name that we can reach out to at that company. And we have a person internally that referred us. So we can name drop. Okay. And so now you got kind of a fork in the road because you got two different areas to pursue. You got it through HR where you're trying to get the decision maker, and you got it through purchasing or procurement where you're trying to find out who's responsible for getting your company added to the vendor list, right? So those are the two avenues or the two approaches that we take to get set up, right? And it requires some legwork, right? It requires some effort. This is not a pick up the phone dial and you're in, right? But it requires knowing what to say. It requires knowing the lingo, right? Because there's certain terminologies in these verticals that they use that if you don't know it, you're not speaking their language, and they're going to tell that you don't know what you're doing, right? So this is one of the things we teach in our course is we teach people, what to say in these different verticals, who they need to be getting in contact with, who's going to typically be the decision maker, and kind of helping navigate that path, right? And so it's intense, man. But here's the thing, and I've always said this. It's the gift that keeps on giving. You got to go through the process one time. And after that, it just pays and pays and pays and pays. As long as you have the epic failure, with one of your guests or something, it just keeps on giving. So I don't know if that answers your question. I went on a tangent, but I get excited talking about it.
You know what, man? I want to kind of reiterate the fact on this real quick. I always have people that are like, oh man, I want to get a travel nursing contract. It's going to be easy. I just jump in and do it. Like with the students that I have. And I'm like, dude, it's not like that. Like it's not, you don't just pick up the phone and all of a sudden you might get lucky. And you know what? Speaking of luck, we're only one conversation away from something to change our entire lives with literally anybody. If you start connecting with people and you send messages, people connect with people during grief, during something that happens in their life, like a birthday or something like that. If anybody listening right now, send messages to people you've contacted with, find out about what's going on in their lives. All it takes is one little piece of response back, that one conversation, and your entire life can change. And that's exactly what happens with Noble, with you, when you literally, and I think a lot of this stuff is about repetition. It's about consistency. Everything that you're doing and that Rafa's doing, that I'm doing, if you don't have that consistent mindset that I'm not getting anywhere, I'm going to quit right now, you can't freaking have that. Like, maybe this business is not built for you. You have to literally do something 100,000 times, and you get that one freaking moment where it's just like, boom, that conversation you had 3 weeks ago comes around, you sent a letter or message or whatever it is, and all of a sudden now you have a conversation with, a general at a hospital, or, the corporate sector on your end. And all it takes is that one time, even if you've done it a billion times, for then, boom, your life is going to change in one specific moment. So your business went like this, that vertical. It was probably one conversation, right?
It was one deal that catapulted it, right? And it's a deal that I've talked about before, but it was a deal that we actually put it together before we got the units to fulfill it, right? So that was crazy. That was exciting for me. It was a little nerve-wracking, but it was great, right? At the same time, because then we were able to go to this multifamily community and say, look, this is the deal that we have, and this is who we're looking to accommodate and provide furnished accommodations to, and this is indefinite, and this is the number of units we need, right? And this is the caliber of guests that we're going to be putting into these units, right? Game over. That's a different conversation, right? That coming in is some of these people do and say, hey, I'm looking for some units to Airbnb. Like, oh no, you're killing me, Rafa. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
Dude, I got to tell you, okay, so I'm loving this because your excitement, your energy, dude, like it's awesome, right? And like going into everything, right? You've become an expert at like having that one conversation, as Jesse was saying. You're awesome at the government contracts, right? Jesse's great at the nurse contracts. I'm not good at either of those, but I'm great at finding locations and getting in contact with the right owners and property managers, right? And going back to what you just said right now, if you can get one of these contracts, like everybody listening to this, right? Short-term rentals isn't Airbnb. That's why I say it's never the same thing, because look, you guys are doing short-term rentals completely outside of this. And you just literally said, hey, I got people to stay at this place before I even got the place. So now the conversation, instead of going, hey, I'm trying to rent out your place, I'm going to bring guests in, and well, how do you get these guests? Well, I use Airbnb. No, thanks, late, right? You have no idea how many people message me on the daily on Instagram asking what I tell people, because they get turned away all the time because they don't want Airbnb. You literally, Noble, just gave the answer, right? Go out and find the people that are going to stay there before you get the place. I've done that a couple times with insurance companies, right? And when you have that conversation with a property manager or an owner, immediately becomes, oh, this guy's doing actual corporate housing, and he's actually doing contracts with other businesses. He's bringing the people he's actually talking about. And you go out and you're getting 6-7 units without ever even needing to use Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, Expedia, none of that, right? And you're already set up and you have this awesome short-term rental business, because even after that contract ends, you already have, number one, the rapport with the property manager or the owner. They already know how you operate. They know the type of clientele that you bring. So if you do need to use Airbnb at that point to fill up a couple vacant days or a couple vacant months, they're not even going to care. They're going to be like, man, you keep doing what you're doing. You keep paying me my rent. How many more units do you want?
Yep, that's facts. That's all facts.
One of the issues too, Noble, is you got to teach people, and you probably do this in your class, how to reverse engineer that thought process. You got to do it backwards. Like literally you're getting the guest before you get the property. And people are very physical in the essence that I need to get this first in order for me to get this. That's just human nature. That's how we are, right? That's like, here's the win. I get the property, the landlord. But if you reverse engineer that, and I think this is where it becomes difficult for people to understand, how am I going to go out and get a nursing contract if I don't even have a house? How am I going to go out and get a contract with the government if I don't have a house or a property yet?
Yeah, it definitely requires you to think differently. It's a bit of a paradigm shift. But the reality is that we, like all of us, like we understand like what the pain points are of these property managers and these owners of these properties, right? And if you can solve that problem, right, and you can do it in a way that creates a win-win. So I'm really huge on that, right? It creates a win-win opportunity where it's a win for you as the service provider. It's a win for them as the property owners or property management company, and it's a win for your guests. That's game on all day long, right? And so when you can engage in conversations where you can paint the picture for them of what that looks like, and how it solves their pain or addresses their pain points, right? And be able to speak to those and remove those, remove those types of objections. Again, Jesse, to your point with sales, that's what it's all about. That's half the battle won right there. And so you can actually do this without having, that customer even. I'll give you an example. So, because the relationship piece, like I pointed out, is huge. So I do this thing. I don't do it anymore, but I used to do this thing, how they say, driving for dollars in traditional real estate. I would do like driving for cash flow, right? So I was driving around. I saw this land being cleared, right? And I saw the sign on these townhomes are coming, right? It was just clear land. And so I was like, man, I knew the city location was like spot on. I was like, man, I wonder if I could get a hold of the owners, right? And so, I went through my process, found out who the owners were, and they were land developers, and that's just what they did. They developed multifamily properties, anything from apartments to townhomes to whatever, and they would either use a kind of a build to rent model, or they would build them and sell them. Okay, and so I know that during the development process, when they're getting phase 1 and phase 2 going, that lease up part is very important, right? Because they want to get these units leased up as fast as possible. And so it was crazy. So I found out who the owner was. I got connected from a couple of friends in the real estate investment space that I met going to events, building relationships. Okay. Found out who the owner of the property was. Had a couple of conversations with him. He said, I'm in. But I worked it out to where I didn't have to pay him any rent. I didn't have to pay him any utilities. I didn't have to pay anything out of pocket, up front, no deposit, no nothing. And I said, I want to get X number of units on the front end because I believe that they'll be able to do X number of dollars. And what I'll do is I'll agree to pay you a percentage of that. And I'm willing to bet that percentage is going to be at least equal to, if not exceed, what you would traditionally charge in rent, right? So he was like, okay, you got 6 months to prove to me that. The second month, we were exceeding what he would have done in rent, right? So I never had to enter into a contract with him, a traditional paid leasing contract anyway. I never had to pay for my utilities. He paid for all of that. All I had to do was make sure that the guests were going to show up. And guess who I used? I used the universities, because there was 3 big ones in town, to put in staff from those universities and doctoral students and stuff, right? And because these were townhomes and they were 3 and 4 bedroom townhomes, we were doing it by the bedroom, okay? And so I told him, this is what I have in mind for the type of guests that I want to put in. And this is the opportunity that I can bring to you. I was creating that win-win-win. He said, let's do it. Dude, we made so much freaking money. The only thing that I didn't right was I didn't execute a proper, proper lease down. So, but a lease up is we're taking units, right? But when they start signing actual leases, we started reducing the number of units. And I set it to where we'll keep the final, I think it was 2 or 3. And I should have did 10, right? Because this was a 60 unit townhome development or something like that. But that's an example of, not having a guest, just having the idea of what this guest type would be like, not having a property at all, but looking at an opportunity and looking to create a win-win-win type of arrangement. And then being able to articulate that in a way to where it makes good financial sense for them. They understand the risk, but they're not too great, right? And doing that based on a relationship that was formed over the course of 30 to 45 days. So man, there's so many ways to slice this thing up and make it work. It's unreal.
Yeah, you know what? You said something in there, and I want everybody listening to realize this. you're paid you're paid directly by the amount of problems that you're able to solve. Like if you look at the people that make the most money in the world, Elon Musk solved what? Electronic vehicle issue. Jeff Bezos is able to solve, I don't need to leave my house, I can have shit delivered to my door, right? So you're paid indirectly by yourself, and you see the most people that make the most money are paid by solving problems. It's like you literally went to this guy, didn't have to pay anything, and had solved a lot of his problems. And you know what? A lot of my students say stuff, and you probably have this too, Noble, where they're like, oh, I'm not going to ask that. They're going to say no. What's the worst that's going to happen if you just ask anyway and they say no? You're going to die if they say no? Like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, literally, you got to ask. So I love stories like that because it makes you really realize, like, you talked about making a bunch of money during that time. You solved issues. And I think that's where, everybody listening now, and like, well, there's every issue's already been solved. Yeah, but you said it earlier, there's 100 different ways to do things. Everybody's situations are different. I mean, literally everybody. So if you're able to solve a problem, just ask. And even if they say no, big deal. It's not going to kill you. I don't know, man. There's a lot of, I like what you just said right now. I think that made a lot of sense.
No, yeah, Noble. So there's there's a lot of things that you said there that I wanted to touch on. And because, man, this is exciting, right? Talking about relationships, let's go back to that really quick. How big is that, right? The relationship part, and then solving those problems that those owners or those people have, right? We were talking about that a little bit. You touched on it. I want to give an example because, like, even one of the big investors that I work with, I have something like 20 properties with him or something. He's like, hey, man, my business partner doesn't want to give you any more units because you have a lot with us. And, we're putting all our eggs in one basket. And I'm like, hey, dude, check this out. Come meet me at this new spot I just got. And they show up and it's a 30-unit complex. And he goes, wow, what are you doing here? How many are you taking? And I'm like, the entire building. I go, I'm taking, and he brought his business partner that day. And I go, I'm taking more here off of one person than I've taken from you over the past year. What's the preset problem in your head, right? That preset notion of you're putting all your eggs in one basket when I'm literally doing this with one person, 30 units, one shot. I've been taking 28 over the past year with you. What's the problem? Let's solve it. And he's like, I thought you were only working with us. And I'm like, bro, like my business is huge. I'm working in 5 different places with 20 different people doing this with multiple different avenue streams. So there's no problem like that whole, like, oh my God, you're going to like, stop thinking that way, right? There's no reason for you to think that I'm going to crash or do something. Now, obviously, if my business fails, that's a different story. But obviously, it's not going to happen that way because I'm working to grow it and I'm doing this with someone else, right? And that relationship part, that 30-unit building came from a relationship from one person who put me in contact with all these other owners, right? And it goes back to the relationship side of things as well. Man, this is really, really awesome. I like it, dude. And then with Jesse saying as well, going into everything else after that, right? It's all the preset thoughts of people. Like when I first was thinking about this 30 unit, I'm thinking like, he's not going to want to lease me all 30. But what's the worst case he says is no. And all I did was, hey, I'll take all of them. Are you willing to lease them all out to me? And he's like, well, yeah, if it works out, right? That's all it took was one question. I go down to a contractor and I go, hey, do you mind putting me in contact with this owner? What's the worst case that's going to happen? No. All right. Well, why not? It's simple. Why not? Not okay, thanks, and then walk away with my head down. Well, why not? What's the problem? Is it a monetary issue? Is it a relationship issue? Is your name on the line here? Am I going to ruin your name? Like, why won't you want to put me in contact with this person, right? Well, I don't know. Like, well, you know what I do. You know how I operate. I can give you a referral fee. I've solved all the problems in that one simple why not question. And now they go, okay, cool, fine. I guess I'll put you in contact with them. And then I go and talk to the owner. And then the owner tells me, well, I don't know how I feel about it. Well, why not? Well, I can tell you what I've been doing for the past 5 years. Here's my track record. Here's the units that I currently have up the street that are doing so and so. And I'm going into this because what you did with that, not having to pay rent, I still haven't succeeded at that yet, but I've always asked, right? And in most cases, they don't do the whole percentage where, hey, you get more than your rent on a percentage base. But I do end up getting either a free month or a free 2 weeks or, I pay half up front and half in the second month. And that cuts my startup cost almost by like 35%. And all it comes is by asking a simple question, right? So anyway, I wanted to touch on that.
30 units, you get 1 month for free on 30 units. Do the math on that.
It's $175,000.
You're welcome. Right?
No, I was just going to say that relationship piece is key, man. When we started the business, I was real intentional about going to real estate investment meetups, right? Because I knew that I wanted to target the multifamily community, and I went to multifamily events because I knew that's where the guys were that I wanted to transact business with. And I was and this is back in the day, but I was the only one in a room of 100 people who was talking short-term rentals. They didn't even know what it was, or it was even a thing. So I'm educating everybody in the room. And I pulled like 3 key connections out of that just gave us a good runway to start our business off. And so, yeah, and there's still guys that I'm connected to this day. And I'm talking about the type of guys who I'm very particular now where I'm at in my business on the type of units I get and things like that. But I'm talking about the type of guys where I could pick up the phone and say, hey, I need 10 doors. Okay, I got them over here on this side of town in this B+ class community, something like that, right? Like those types of relationships, dude. That's a game changer.
Gold, absolutely. Those are the best people to have in your phone book, ready to call, and that you trust and that they trust you. Because the trust part is huge. For them to say, yeah, well, I got 10 units. Like now, anytime something comes up, I'm the first person they call. Don't call anybody else. Call me. And if I can take it, I'll take it. If I can't take it. So I've actually had a conversation with one of these owners, and he goes, hey, I have this 4-bedroom house. I want this much money for it. And I'm like, well, these numbers don't make sense for me, but I'll tell you what, I'm not about to try to cut down on your profits or try to make it like a one-side win situation. Put it on the market at an extra like $400. And if it hits, rent it out to someone else. If it doesn't, come back and we'll talk about where we can come to an agreement where it's a win-win for both of us. In some cases, he's leased it out to other people for way more money that I'm like, I would never pay that. But in some cases, he calls me back and he goes, all right, dude, listen, it's been 30 days. What's up? What can you do for me? And we have this awesome relationship, and it just goes back and forth, back and forth. And I mean, dude, you guys have seen it. I've grown so fast over the past year with this whole like relationship thing. So, man, this is awesome.
Rafa, you brought something up too. Don't only call these guys when you need something. Like I was talking about earlier. Like you just talked about having them in your phone book. So when you have them in that phone book, you be consistent and send them a message. Like if you literally went through all your contacts right now, and you're like, this month I'm going to contact 3 people a day in my contacts, and you just put together a letter, an email, a text, and you're not asking for anything. Hey, this is Rafa. This is Jesse. I'm just checking in, man. Hopefully everything's going well. I saw that you got married last year at this date. I want to say congratulations or happy anniversary. Guess what? Those people start remembering you. It's a thought process again. People remember people when there's emotion attached to it. So you're bringing an emotion with their anniversary and you talking about it. And guess what? They're going to think about you later down the road. Everything that you do today is going to bring money in your pocket tomorrow. So like every little action that you do today, it could be 6 months, a year, whatever it is, it'll come back. So those relationships are highly important to feed and continue to nurture. And it doesn't have to be like, I need to get something from you. You know what I mean?
100%. 100%. Some of the greatest relationships, I'll watch somebody on Instagram that I know that I've done business in the past with, and I'm like, dude, you just got this? Wow, congrats. Hey, man, like awesome job, right? Or like some of my contractors, I'll be driving up the street and I see the work that I know it's theirs because they have a specific style. And I'm like, bro, did you just do that building? Like, man, awesome job. Congratulations. They're like, dude, you noticed? Like, oh shit, thanks, And it's always been those like, what's that book? How to Win Friends and Influence People or something like that. Talks about those key things on how to get these people. Like if you become the likable guy in the back of their head, and it's genuine because you actually care. You're not going around being fake, right? Like you actually care about things. And these people building these relationships. Like this guy calls me like every morning and I'm like, bro, are you calling me just to wake me up today or what? And we joke around like that now, right? And he's like, no, bro, like I got this going on. You got this unit. And I'm like, all right, I'll be there in like 30 minutes. Or it's like, hey, dude, I don't have a car. Come pick me up. And this dude owns like 100 doors, like, he's always busy, but he always makes time for me, right? So therefore, I will always make time for him, no matter what I'm doing. All right, I'm in the middle of this. Can you come here or I'll go there? Or hey, even when it comes down to like a maintenance issue, that same type of relationship, well, who's going to cover it? Listen, I'll take care of it. It's not a big deal, right? I'm going to lose a couple $100. Who cares? Because that relationship is going to pay off tenfold over time, right? So anyway, Noble, we're at the top of the hour, man, and I don't want to keep you going here because this is awesome. Like so happy you came on. I really appreciate it. Let me ask you before we go into our final questions, like what's going on this year with you? What do you got lined up for 2022 with your business and everything else?
Yeah, man. So, one thing that's, been big for me as of late is just the educational side of the business, which is not anything that I ever intended to do. Right. But it's really kind of started to gain some traction. And so I've really leaned into that, and I found that I actually enjoy it. Like I get a kick out of seeing people get wins and stuff, and be able to help people. And my wife and I, like, we've been helping people for going back years, kind of getting set up and get started and stuff. But as you guys know, like through Clubhouse and other social media and stuff, people start asking you, like, do you got a product? Do you got a course? Do you got this?
Yeah.
Do you got that? Right? And so it's kind of born out of that, right? And so really that's been as of late, my immediate focus. Of course, we're always looking. Man, I tell you what, we have had this past year. We've had more deals thrown at us than you can believe, and that's really from relationships, not existing ones that I have, but relationships that have come about as a result of being on Clubhouse and things like that.
That's how we're here.
That's how I made it to the bigger pockets, dude. Just having a simple relationship. Yeah.
Exactly. So we're looking at some off-market stuff right now. Some ownership type stuff. My wife and I want to pull the trigger on something international. And so we're looking at a couple of off-market international deals. And so I'm at a place right now where I used to want 100 units, right? And I was like, man, when we get to 100 units, I'm gonna do this and that, right? I'm watching Sean and I'm watching other people move. And now I'm at a different place, I think, in my life where it's really lifestyle and quality of the business, right? And so we're very particular about what we how we scale and what that looks like, right? And so we're just kind of looking at options and exploring, different things that we're probably gonna pull the trigger on this year, both ownership and even potentially some more arbitrage stuff. And the education side, really kind of doubling down on that and trying to give even more value than we've been able to give. So that's really my focus for this year, man.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, dude, I relate with you so much because even me, the same thing. I was like, 100 units. I'm going to be making all this every month. I'm going to go buy this beach house, that cabin. And now I'm like, I'm at this in so many units. And like, even when I get them now, like I want people around me to do better, right? Like I'm handing them out like, hey, I got a unit. You ready to get started? I got you. Like, I already solved your problem of finding the location. Let's go. Right. And they're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, what's the problem? Do you want to do what I do? Do you want to have the freedom? Let's go. I got you a unit. Let's get started. Right. And now I'm very particular about the location, the units, the relationships of people that I'm working with, because I no longer go into these big complexes anymore. I don't care about them. Right. People are like, well, how do you get a yes there? I don't, because I don't go after them. Right. I'm getting the small like owners who are willing to just give them to me whenever they're available. So that's cool, man. Congratulations. That's awesome. Let's talk about your course a little bit before we go into our big break question. How does that look? And then, at the end, we'll ask you where people can get a hold of you. But like, how's your course look? I know you've teamed up with, we've had President Leo on here in the past, and he's in the car rental side of things. So like, you want to talk about your course and how that looks?
Yeah. So I have two. One of them is just specific to the short-term rental space. And so that's the hospitality cash flow group coaching program that I have, right? And in that one, that's where I really take students who are either brand new to the business or they have units and they're looking to scale. And I have students in there that have more units than I do, right? But they're looking to do more advanced stuff because they want to start doing more direct booking type stuff. And so that's the group coaching program. We have about 16 in there right now. And so if people are interested in kind of that piece, the hospitality cash flow group coaching would be the way to go. Conversely, I'm also, like you said, part of an academy. It's called the 7-Figure Academy with myself, President Leo, and Hannibal Collins, and the guys that we met on Clubhouse. And inside that academy, that's really more of kind of the entry level position. So people are looking to get in at entry level, but they have an interest in short term. They have an interest in in the tour and hire car and rental car stuff, and they have an interest in building up their business and personal credit profiles and things like that. Then that is a good resource for that, right? And that's kind of a more monthly membership based type subscription level service, but they get access to all of us as coaches in that platform. So those are kind of the two options that I have, going on right now. And so people can tap in with me on that.
Cool, man. Appreciate that. So, okay, let's ask, what was your big break in life, my friend? Considering that this is the show, The Big Break, we ask this to everybody. It could be personal, relationship, business, entrepreneurship. Like, what was your big break where you go, man, if it wasn't for that one thing, I wouldn't be where I'm at. Or if it wasn't for that one thing, I wouldn't have done this. Or if it wasn't for this, I wouldn't have enjoyed that. Like, what was the big break in your life?
man, is one that stands out more than any other. And so some people have heard me tell the story a little bit, and I'll keep it brief. But you know, while I was working my last my last W-2, my wife got diagnosed with a brain tumor. Okay, and so you know, obviously we had to, after they found out that she had the tumor or whatnot, had to schedule the surgery immediately. Go in there to get it removed, whatnot. So got in there, got the surgery scheduled. What should have been like a 6-7 hour surgery ended up taking like 14 hours, right? But they were able to get all of the tumor out and everything. Now, as a result of where the tumor was located and stuff, you know, they had to cut what's called the olfactory nerve. So the olfactory nerve controls your sense of taste and smell. Okay. And so, but they had to cut that because the tumor had grown around it, right? But in the process, so she gets through the surgery and she's in ICU. She's in ICU for almost a week, maybe a little more. And day 2 in ICU, her organs start to fail. And she flatlines in the ICU. And dude, she was gone for like 3 minutes. It seemed like forever. And I still get choked up when I tell the story. So she had flatlined. So they came in, they were able to resuscitate her, right? And bring her back and everything. And then about a week later, a little over a week later, she got released from the ICU on a Christmas Eve. So for that's our favorite time of the year right now. But you know, as a result of them cutting off her olfactory nerve, she can no longer taste and smell forever for the rest of her life. And this is back in 08, 09, I think this happened. And so this is 09, I believe. And so, but she's, other than that, you know, she's healthy, you know, she just, you know, she got no major problems. But during the course of that time, when she got released from the hospital, she had to learn how to like feed herself again, learn how to bring her spoon to her mouth, learn how to talk, learn how to walk again. Like it affected like everything. She had to go through like a major like rehabilitation type thing. And so I had a decision to make in that moment of whether I was going to stay home and help care for my wife, right? Or I was going to go to my job, you know, and keep, you know, my commission sales job and try to keep selling. And I chose to stay home and take care of my wife, right? And so, you know, it was 6 to 8 weeks later or so when I got called back into the office on the tail end of her, you know, kind of getting healed and everything. I got called into the office for a company-wide sales meeting, right? So I'm back in the office at this company-wide sales meeting, and the CEO berated me in front of everybody in the company on this call, right? For having dismal sales numbers for the previous like 6 to 8 weeks. Everybody in the company knew what we were going through and her, you know, and her situation. And so it was in that moment that I said, I'm never going to be in a situation again where I have to, where my time is dictated by someone else, right? And so I said, I'm going to, you know, sell my butt off until I can cash out of this job, essentially, right? And that's what I ended up doing. And in 2014, I left for good. And you know, and it was a process. It was a 5-year, you know, just selling because it's commission, right? So you get the ebbs and flow of that. But I hit on the tail end of that. I hit a couple of large, you know, 7-figure deals where my commission was ridiculous, and I cashed out and I left and I never looked back. And I went into entrepreneurship with the agency piece, and then on the heels of that, got into the STR piece. Never looked back, and that was the big break for me. Was that event.
Dude, that's an awesome story, man. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. That was really, really cool. So I'm happy to hear that your wife is good, by the way. I've met her. She's awesome as well, right? So let me ask you the final question that we ask here before anything else. What's an actionable step that you can give the listeners and viewers where once they're done with this episode, they can go out and apply to either move forward in entrepreneurship or their STR journey or whatever the case may be? What do you think is the next best step for them to go, okay, you want to do this? This is what you got to do right now as soon as you hit stop or pause.
Got it. So it's so important to educate yourself in this business, right? Because we all know there's a lot of different avenues that you can go down this business, right? And so you need to do a little bit of educating to determine which one of these paths you want to take, right? And so there's a lot of free content out there that you can take advantage of, and then there's paid content that you can take advantage of. And then there's coaching and mentoring and all that other stuff. Whatever that looks like for them, that's what they need to do. They need to educate themselves on the options that are available in this short-term rental industry, because there's so much available. We can all eat, right, off of this industry. There's so much available, right? And so really just getting out there and getting acclimated to what the different business models are that you can you can pursue, and then take action. So don't just educate yourself, right? And don't suffer from the analysis paralysis, right? So I'm a reformed, recovering, analyzing perfectionist, right? And so take action.
Me too, man.
Yeah, take action, take massive action. So that would be my tip right there.
Cool, man. Appreciate that. Okay.
I think that, this conversation went really well. I mean, we dove into a lot of different things. Noble, I mean, man, COVID put us together in this way. I mean, separated a lot of people, but also brought a lot of people together in a lot of ways. And that's how we're here talking right now, is because Clubhouse, which I wouldn't have ever been on Clubhouse if I wasn't stuck in my freaking house all the time. And most of us were, right? Like our kids were home and things like that. So, but yeah, man. So tell us how we can reach you and how we can connect with you.
Yeah, definitely, man. I can be reached on pretty much all of the social platforms. People can reach me on either IG, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm rarely on Twitter, but they can get me there too. And then also I have a 10K card. So Noble, Noble, the number 10 and then K.com, Noble10K.com. They can get access to my channels there, and even set up a call if they want to. So yeah, that's how they get older.
That is awesome, man. Well, there it is, folks. We had Noble Crawford here today teaching us all kinds of good stuff about short-term rentals, scaling your business. You're up to almost 40 units, man. That's badass. You're being intentional with what you're doing right now. Everybody listening, please give our show a like. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe and like. All the information will be on the handle below. We appreciate you guys all for being here. Noble, thanks, man. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, it's been my pleasure, man. I appreciate you guys having me. I'm extending an invite right now for y'all to come on to season 3 of the Hospitality Cash Flow Podcast. We're getting ready to kick that off. So that invite has been extended to both of them.
I'm down, man. I appreciate that for sure. You let me know when. Yeah, we'll be there for sure. Thanks, Noble.
Cool. Thanks, man.